There we go. Welcome to Developing an Agenda for Change in Corporate America, today's session of the Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series. Today's webinar is offered in valued partnership with Tech United NJ, and we thank them for their support. The Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series is a learning opportunity that brings our audience lessons of resilience, resourcefulness, responsibility, and reinvention through conversations with thought leaders and business leaders from across industry spectrums. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about today's presenters. Dr. Randall Pinkett is an entrepreneur, speaker, author, and scholar. His is a leading voice for his generation in business, technology, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Randall is co-founder, chairman, and CEO of BCT Partners, which is a multi-million-dollar research, training, consulting, technology, and analytics firm headquartered in Newark, New Jersey. BCT's mission is to provide insights and diverse people that lead to equity. BCT's work has been recognized by Forbes, EY, Inc., and Black Enterprise. Randall is a 1994 alumnus of Rutgers School of Engineering, and he followed that with advanced degrees from Oxford and MIT, those little schools, Dr. Jeffrey Robinson is an award-winning business professor, international speaker, and entrepreneur. A leading faculty member at RBS since 2008, Jeff holds the Prudential Chair in Business and is the academic director of the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. His research specialty lies at the intersection of business and society with projects and initiatives addressing diversity, economic inclusion, inclusive entrepreneurship, and innovation. Jeff is a 1995 alumnus of Rutgers College and Rutgers School of Engineering, and he followed that with advanced degrees from Georgia Tech and Columbia. Welcome to both of you. And Jeff, I'm going to let you take things from here.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you, Rutgers Business School. It's nice to have the opportunity to talk to our alumni and friends. This gives us a chance to tell you a bit about our book and then also have a discussion. As Juneteenth approaches us here this weekend, we get a chance to talk about the Black professionals and leadership within corporations and beyond. So this is a great opportunity for us to have a conversation about that. And of course, in order to do that, I wanted to bring on my co-author and best friend, Dr. Randall Pinkett. Dr. Pinkett, hello.
Greetings, Dr. Robinson, Professor Robinson, AKA JR.
Yeah,
it's good to be here.
We go way back.
That's right. Good to be wherever you are. Good to be here.
All right. Well, some people know a part of our story if they've read our books or have heard us speak before, but let's set the stage by telling folks a bit about how and where we met. It was on the banks. It was at Rutgers College of Engineering way back in 1989. Both of us were engineering students at what's now called the School of Engineering. Then it was the College of Engineering. And we were both told that we should go to one of the student organizations. Student organization was the Rutgers chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. At Rutgers, it was called MEET, the Minority Engineering Educational Task. And we go to the first meeting, our first week of school. There's a lot of upperclassmen who were there, but of course, we don't know anybody because we are the first year students. They say, turn to your left, turn to your right, meet somebody new. I looked behind me, and there was this other tall, dark, and handsome guy behind me who favored myself. And I said, who is this guy? He introduced himself as Randy. I introduced myself as Jeff, and I guess the rest is history because not only were we fast friends, but we have been involved in each other's lives ever since. So that's 30 plus years. That's my version of it.
Well, your version is accurate, and it matches my recollection. I am grateful that our paths crossed. You've heard me often reference a lyric from a song from the best-selling play, Hamilton.
Yeah.
Song, Not Throwing Away My Shot, where they say, what are the odds the gods would put us all in one spot? And I just am grateful that we were both in the same spot and that we didn't throw away our shot. As the story goes, we were roommates at Rutgers. We became business partners at Rutgers. We've joined the same fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, fraternity incorporated. We've been the best men in each other's weddings. We're we're co-authors of 2 books. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. So it's been a blessing to know you and to consider you a brother to me.
Well, you're right on. And, I probably, like other folks who are listening in or watching this, even after the fact, the relationships that we build on campus are often the ones that we build for a lifetime. And I know the theme of this these sessions are about lifelong learning. But, in my case, in Dr. Pinkett's case, it's certainly also about lifelong friends. So that's the backstory of who we are and where we're coming from. We're here to talk about one of our newest book that we've penned together. But just one more thing before we dive into that, I'll set it up by saying that we had many of the same experiences growing up and going through internships and working at corporations and going into business together, where we were the one or one of a few that looked like us in the room. For me, I believe also for you, that was true from elementary school, even here in New Jersey. We're back in the 70s and 80s. We have a diverse state, but it was not as diverse as it is now. And depending on where you lived, there may not have been many people of color who were around you. So for me in Parsippany, maybe for you in Hightstown, and then coming to Rutgers, which as diverse as it is today, still didn't mean that there were Black students in every one of my classes as an engineering student. Then going on to corporations and going into graduate school. So there's a theme here, which was the title of our first book, which was Black Faces in White Places. And so I think some of what we'll talk about today certainly relates to other groups who may be one of a few, even in 2022. What do you want to add to that, Dr. Pinkett?
Again, as we mentioned, we've written these 2 books, and the first book, Black Faces in White Places, was a reflection of our lived experience, which you cited a moment ago, but also the lived experiences of other African Americans who've had that same experience. And as we've traveled and met and interacted with people, we've heard also women who have taken from that first book, as they've been the only woman in a predominantly male environment, or others who've been underrepresented in whatever environment they find themselves, and asking the proverbial question, how do I navigate this environment and not lose a sense of who I am?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a key point. And so it's a theme certainly that we've carried on as we've been able to create our next book, which is our latest book. So let me share my screen here with everyone so you can see a little bit about our latest book, which we call Black Faces in High Places. And this book had a slightly different focus than the first one. It's certainly about success and being able to get to those high places, you might say, where it's still, and even in 2022, there are lots of Black people who are the first to do something, the first CEO of certain company, the first person to be at that level in the organization. But now we are in 2022, and it's not just a question of success. We're also promoting, as you'll find out in the book, how do you think about creating a legacy and significance? So we'll talk about that, but certainly our theme is not just to get there, but also to stay there and to bring others along. And so, the subtle, maybe not so subtle subtext of the books has a lot to do with how corporations need to change in order to recognize and be inclusive of Black professionals and others who are seeking to make their way. I'll say a little bit about the book, and then we'll kind of go back and forth to give a little bit more dimension to some of the things that we've written in this book. But when we write books, it's an interesting process. We've known each other for a long time, but there's a lot of pain in writing, the labor of love, because we want to be useful, and we have a certain standard, and we have a certain way that we have go about writing. And the fact is, we both have 5 degrees, including PhDs. So there's a lot of intensity around our writing process and the research that goes into these books. Is that a good summary?
It is. And up until this book, I certainly considered us authors, but I do take a measure of pride that I experienced a level of maturity in our writing that was noticeably more mature than our prior project. Not only our understanding of how to conceptualize the book, but then almost like an artist, how do we want to position the introduction, and what's the right way to enter into this concept, and how do we frame it properly? I just thought, and then getting the right words on paper. I thought that while it was a labor of love, I completely echo that. This was not an easy undertaking, and it had been 10 years since we had written the prior book when we started this project. So we needed a break, because that last project was a heavy lift, and this one was a heavy lift. But I did take a measure of pride in our maturity as authors. This was a lot of research, a lot of friendly debate, a lot of analysis to arrive at this finished product, which I would even argue is actually longer than perhaps we would have ever anticipated.
Oh, that's true. Well, again, like what's on the screen there, we researched a lot. We cite other people's research. We brought in interviews that we conducted. In some cases, we followed the stories of people who we had profiled and talked about or interviewed in the first book. And from that, we distilled what we call 10 strategic actions that were common to these leaders. So yeah, you're right on. And just to give the audience a sense of who these leaders were, our examples from the book were certainly some of the most prominent Black leaders of our time. All the way from President Obama and Vice President Harris to people who have reached the top of their game in entrepreneurship, in corporate America, in education. You may recognize some of these faces. Some of them you may not. They may be people you never heard of. But on this screen are billionaires, government officials, folks that we've interviewed or profiled over time. So it's not just some of the thoughts that we put down, although we did put that in the book, but we certainly pulled from all of these and others, very prominent and successful folks. So with that in mind, if you heard the story from the beginning here today, we're engineers, so we think a certain way. Like things to be in very precise and logical order. And so when we wrote this book, we wanted to organize those 10 strategic actions in a certain way that made sense. These were lessons that were coming from the folks you just saw on this other screen, but they are also are things that we think make a path or a pathway for folks to think about and to consider. And certainly we took a distinct perspective on this from understanding the Black experience. But the organization of the 10 strategic actions and the 4 levels that are involved in moving up this little mountain that you see here are all a reflection of our sort of logical minds hopefully folks will follow along. And so that's where this next slide gives you a sense of the things that we thought about for each of the sections. For those of you who are interested in learning more about the book, we'll definitely share with you ways that you can purchase it, but you can always go on Amazon and find it. We've got a partner of ours called Pyramid Books that also has it. We'll share all that information at the end. When you get into the book, you'll see that there are certain mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets that we have organized throughout the book, and they build. I think one of the things that this graphic shows is that as you climb, you're also seeing different things at different levels. But that first level of independent action really builds so that you can have the next level, and interdependent action is in that second level, and then we think of collaborative action as being the third, and then amplified action as being the fourth level, and that you need to master the things at each level in order to get to that next level, and that's the way that we've built and constructed the book. What do you want to add to that, Dr. Pinkett?
Only thing I would add is that the strategic actions that we outline in the book were and are reflective of the patterns that we heard across the interviews and our lived experience. That as we looked at these prominent figures that traverse philanthropy, government, media, corporate America, entrepreneurship, etc., there were themes that recurred, and we distilled down to these 10 strategic actions. And so there are two things of notice. One is that they are cumulative. 2 builds on 1, 3 builds on 2 and 1, 10 builds on 9 through 1. And so strategic action 1 is arguably the foundation for this journey that you saw in the prior slide. But also these strategic actions are organized in a way that they're, as their name implies, actionable. This is really about distilling down what are the things you need to do, what are the things you should be mindful of doing that we've learned from those who've done it that allow you to reach the top and to stay there. And there's a certain vision that we establish in the book that it's not just about getting to the top, and it's not even necessarily about staying at the top. It's about pulling the levers available to you when you're there that benefit others. It's like the difference between being at the table and having a voice at the table. And then what is your voice saying at the table?
Yeah.
We give you a blueprint for what you should be mindful of to prepare yourself to get there. And then once you're there, to be ready and to have the wherewithal to effectuate positive change.
Yeah, great point. And that to us is sort of the magic, you might say, of what we're talking about, that what we've seen people be able to do in building their brand and their career is really to go through the arc of development. So here's what we'll do. I'll just talk briefly about these first couple of things in level 1. And then we'll get to the main topic of today, talking about networks, mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship, and how they are really important for Black professionals in particular, but for inclusive environments in general. So that's the pattern we'll take. And then after we do present a little bit on that, then I think that's a good point for us to take some questions. So I didn't talk about the first strategic action, although it's all about self-determination. It's really foundational. It's about understanding yourself. It's certainly an inside-out approach to the leadership and professional development. You got to know yourself. But even in knowing yourself, you need to understand that we all get very comfortable. So one of the graphics that's on the screen is one of the ones we talk about in the book, which is all about moving from that comfort zone into a growth zone. That means you got to push through the fear zone and the learning zone. This is something that we saw consistently from the people we interviewed, and certainly something we realized in our own life. We got some interesting stories about getting through and out of our comfort zones. But I put this squarely in any leader's development path, that in order to grow and develop as a leader, you've got to get out of your comfort zones. But I in the context of thinking about what has to change in corporate America has been in a very comfortable place. And what is being pushed and forced and often instigated by employee resource groups around the country is pushing companies to get out of their comfort zone and to grow, to accommodate and be more inclusive of different people. Corporations can be very static and get very comfortable, but then things happen and they didn't realize that there were undercurrents or there were other things that were going on because they didn't take into account that their diverse workforce or would-be diverse workforce would be different than the traditional corporate America stance on things. And so to me, that there's a connection between what happens in the individual as well as what needs to happen in the organizational sense. Let me go to this other concept, which I have to give some credit to one of my RBS colleagues. Some of you may know Andrew Gogates, who used to be the university relations person in the careers area for RBS. Number of years ago, he in fact, this is probably just before he was retiring, he was telling me about this Japanese concept called ikigai. And the conversation was in the context of what do people do when they retire? What kinds of things do they do? And I guess he had been doing some reading and he came across this concept, which you see on the screen. And ikigai is a fascinating thing that the folks who live in Okinawa are kind of the prototype for, although the concept is all across Japan. It is a way of thinking about your existence, your meaning for life. And we thought it was a very powerful thing to put in our book, because we meet so many people who are working great jobs, but are not happy at all. It's like, well, where's the disconnect? Well, disconnect is what you see here on the screen. Obviously, ikigai is represented by this Venn diagram of multiple circles, but each circle means something. And what we found in talking to folks, and even from our own experience, is that if you can start to answer the questions and find the overlapping areas to the answers to these questions, you find more meaning and have more energy to do the things that are meaningful than if you don't. So these are important questions. What can you get paid for? What does the world need? What do you love to do? And what are you good at? And the sweet spot is in the middle. Now, not everybody's going to get to that sweet spot in their first job or career, right? It may take a little navigating to figure that out. But asking those questions really brings on some congruence in your life. We've met so many Black professionals who do great work, but it's not like fulfilling to them. And so because of that, they do all kinds of stuff in the community. They do all kinds of things, as side hustles or hobbies or volunteer work. And we're not saying that those aren't good things to have, but imagine a space where all of those things came together. And that's what ikigai is. It's certainly a source of many of the pivots that we've seen people talk about in our interviews and in our experience. I probably missed something in that. What would you want to add to that there, Dr. Pinkett?
Just that the translation for ikigai is a reason for being. And in as much as this first part of the book, Strategic Actions 1, 2, and 3, are literally foundational. They exist at the foundation of the book, and they comprise part level 1 of the book of Black Faces in High Places. This last stop of the foundation is about self-mastery and finding meaning. What are you called to do? We're believers that we're all here for a reason, and that old adage that the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you figured out why you were born. And this concept of ikigai, which I give you credit for bringing to me, as you gave credit to a colleague for bringing to you, is really powerful in centering one's meaning through a framework that prompts you to ask the right questions, and through those intersecting concentric circles, seeing where you might have felt like there were some gaps in fulfillment, or gaps in leveraging your talent, or gaps in where you saw your place in the world. Like, this brings it all together. It brings it all together into a really, really compelling framework, and a simple, without a simple without being simplistic framework.
Yeah, and it indicates there's a shift between surviving and thriving.
Yeah,
You know, there's a lot of folks who are, going through the motions, surviving, having good lives, but not thriving. And in that chapter in the book, we really get into that. So I'm glad you pointed that out. All right, so that's foundational, and for Black professionals, just like anyone else, we think that the inside work is very important. And so we spend some time there, as we did today, just putting some of these issues on the table, and with ways for people to unpack that. In the book, we also answer questions like, well, what if you haven't found your ikigai? What do we need to do? What kinds of things do we need to do to develop with some assessments and the like? But now we're going to shift gears. Let's get into the meat of it. So now, if you are looking carefully, thinking about your career and possibilities, the question is, well, what happens next? So we've got a couple of questions that we want the audience to actually get involved in. So there is something called Mentimeter. Some of you may have used it before. You go to menti.com. We want you to answer a couple of questions as we go into this next segment. Before we get to questions, you use the code 40847557. You go to menti.com and put in that code, and there's some questions there. The questions are about you and your career. Give us a sense of what they'll be asking there, Pinkett.
Yep, and I'm putting the code in the chat and the website in the chat to make it easy. In fact, I'm going to even put into there a direct link. There's a direct link in the chat for those that want to just do one click. But the three questions that we have presented to the audience are, how many promotions have you received in your career thus far? And then two of Dr. Robinson's favorite questions, because I've been around him long enough. Question two, how many people are you currently mentoring? And then question three, how many people are currently mentoring you? Okay. And that will open the door for this conversation that we'll have around mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship.
All right. So I'm gonna put it also in the Q&A box. I guess some people can get it from there. I can see people are starting to do it. There's just 4 questions, I believe. How many promotions have you received in your career thus far? How many people are you mentoring right now? Are you being mentored? How many people are currently mentoring you? And then we'll share with you some of those results. All right, so let me stop sharing the screen and let's talk this out. When we wrote this next section in the book, we certainly were thinking about folks who are in corporations, but it's applicable to anybody in any career path, even entrepreneurship. There are important things that need to be understood. We categorize them into three chapters: strategic actions that have to do with networking and building power, mentoring and maximizing mentoring, and leveraging our might, which is, again, talking about how to be interdependent through organizations and those interdependent types of efforts. In the midst of that, we covered 2 other topics: sponsorship and allyship. All right. And when we talk to lots of different groups, we kind of summarize it as mentorship, sponsorship, allyship, that those three things are key for making more inclusive environments. In particular, we're thinking about Black employees, Black professionals, Black leaders, but certainly it has implications for others. So let's take them quickly one at a time. We'll say a little bit about each, and then we can also talk about how the results came out for what we just saw from some of you. So I'll start it off. Mentorship. Well, let me go back a step, just to say something about networks. Networks are really important, and our approach in the book has to do entirely with thinking about it in a structural way. It's not just collecting business cards and saying that's networking, but no, we're a lot more strategic about that, about who's in your network, what parts of the organization they represent, and certainly how you can leverage your network and in order to build credibility and power, great reputation. So there's a lot of great research that we cite there, and certainly certain things from the interviews. But a part of your network needs to be your mentor. Having mentors, plural. And then again, thinking about how to maximize that mentoring, that mentorship relationship. It's not enough just to have somebody who's giving you advice about your work, but how do you have who's in your network, who's mentoring you to give you insights into that next level in the organization. Why don't you
and let me add this, that and we talk about that there's a different kind of mentor at a different stage in one's career.
Yeah.
Early in one's career, the perception is that you need someone high ranking or influential, and that's not what the research suggests. It suggests that you would be most benefiting from someone who's close to your technical or functional area. You're an accountant and you're being mentored by another accountant. You're an engineer and being mentored by another engineer. You're in marketing and somebody who's experienced in marketing, not necessarily senior executive, but someone who's competent in that technical functional arena. Mid-career is when you begin to broker mentoring relationships that are spanning other functions, other areas, other departments, other locations, et cetera. And then it's as you move into kind of the mid-career, as you aspire to move into the executive ranks, that a senior, high-ranking, executive-level mentor is most beneficial to you. So it's not just, to your point, Dr. Robinson, having this portfolio of networks, that it's not one size fits all, and we'll show you the data in a moment, but it's also being mindful at different stages, what is the right profile in terms of either expertise or seniority that mentor will best serve you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I can bring up that slide with some of the data from Breaking Through, unless you want to do show some Mentimeter information or talk about that.
So I'm not able to share my screen. I think you are. So if you want to share the data, we can go there, and then we can then go to the Menti from there.
And we'll ask our friend Margaret to give you.
Okay, actually, I can do it. So let me go to the data first, and then we can their data, that is, and then we can go to other data. So you should be able to see the results of the poll.
See them, yeah.
We're going to come back to this topic in a moment. So just put a pin in this first poll of promotions. And as we see here, not surprisingly, a concentration between 0 and 7, with the interesting highest number 2 to 3. But let's look at the mentoring data, which is among Dr. Robinson's favorite. Some interesting results here, that the highest number is 0.
Yeah.
People that are currently mentoring you. But equally surprising is that although 2 is second, that's noteworthy, but equally surprising, the number one response for how many people they're mentoring is also 0.
Yeah.
So something telling there, but second to that is in the 1 to 2 range. So we got 0 showing up as highest, and then 1 to 2 mentors, 2 more specifically as the most popular choice thereafter.
Well, on your screen now, you've got how many people are currently mentoring you.
Yes.
Yeah, and for a lot of folks, they don't have a mentor who are listening in today here. And so that, these are interesting patterns. But for those of you who are being mentored by multiple people right now, you are at the head of the class, you might say, because what's obvious to me is that not enough people are taking advantage of mentoring, and for those Black professionals that are tuned in, that pattern of not having people mentor you as you're moving up in your organization is one that will have dire effects on your career path if you don't address it. Which brings us to what's on the screen. Go ahead, Dr. Pinkett.
Yeah, so as you can see, as you are hopefully digesting what's on the slide, this is one of the studies we cite in the book, which looks, again, back at this idea of career stage and what are the right needs for mentoring at the right time. And if I just focus your attention on the comparison between minorities who become executives and minorities who become managers, what you'll notice is they're roughly aligned in their average number of mentors, about 1.5, just shy of 2, but they're roughly equal, although minority executives have the edge. But then you go to mid-career, what you see is a 2x phenomenon, that the minorities who become executives have twice the number of mentors on average than those who plateau at the managerial level. And then at the executive, or rather the latter stage of their careers, from upper middle management to executive management, it's a 5x difference. So think about, and notice that the minorities who become managers and plateau, their numbers are going down, literally from 1.4 to 1.2 to 0.5, and those who become executives are going up. And so there's this widening gap, painting a picture of this growing need for more and more mentors as one's career progresses. So for those of you, as Dr. Robinson said, who showed up on the right side of the slide of how many people are mentoring you, kudos to you. But the other thing I'll say, and I'll pass it back to Dr. Robinson, is the research also shows that those who become executives also have a higher propensity to be mentors to others. Mm-hmm. That they're building those networks of relationships for those that are coming up through the organization, not only because it's a good way of giving back what they're learning, but also because it is helping to propel them through having others in the organization that are a part of their network of relationships throughout the organization.
Yep, that's a great point. Let's see. I'm going to show another graphic from the same study that we cite in the book, which tells a little bit of the story around the promotions. And if this wasn't obvious, I'll make it obvious to everyone. The way the study was done, it compared the folks who plateaued as managers with those who excelled as executives. And then it compared it between minority and non-minorities in the study that was done by David Thomas, who's now president of Morehouse College, although he was a professor at Harvard Business School when he wrote that study. The interesting thing here goes back to the number of promotions you've had, and just to shortchange, not to shortchange the study, but to sort of get to the crux of it. When we talk about minorities, or in this case, we'll be specific about Black executives, they didn't take every promotion that was offered to them. Their path was a bit slower than their white colleagues. And part of the answer, or part of the reason for that, is we found when we talked to some of the folks that we interviewed, one in particular, Don Thompson, who when we first interviewed him, he was in the C-suite as the COO of McDonald's, but over the 10-year period between the books, he became the CEO and then retired. And one of the things he said earlier on to us was that you just can't take every every promotion, you got to find the things that you're passionate about, things that you're excited about. If you're passionate about it, you'll do the extra work necessary to be excellent at it. And so he was an example of how the trajectory and the path may be different for Black employees or Black professionals, for Black leaders moving through the organization. And for corporate America, I think there's something to be acknowledged there, that if the pathways are different, maybe some of the scaffolding needs to be different as well, for mentoring, for sponsorship, something we haven't spent a lot of time on in this talk, but finding the people in the room who are making decisions about promotions, having the right people in the room who are able to identify the folks who are diverse candidates for those kinds of promotions. And then again, having allies who are dismantling the barriers to some of the access and opportunities that are happening at different portions of the organization. I'm sure I missed something in talking through that very quickly. So what do you want to add to that, Dr. Pinkett?
I'm going to share one last slide, and then we can hopefully go to Q&A, ask you some questions in the Q&A.
Sure.
So let me do two things. Let me go back to the promotions data that you all shared with us, just so I can do it. I can honor it properly. So what we see here is that the concentration is largely between 0 to 7 promotions, with 2 to 3 being the most prevalent answer. If we go again back to the research, this slide, if you really look closely at it, is paradoxical. It is contradictory. It is counterintuitive. Because let me just summarize what it's saying. It's saying that minority executives in every single category of change and advancement show up with lower numbers than those who become, higher numbers than those who become executives. That they have more departmental changes, more promotions, more location changes, et cetera, et cetera. You'd expect at minimum for promotions that you'd have more promotions from managers who plateau, to Dr. Robinson's narrative a moment ago. And the answer is what Dr. Robinson offered, is that when we interviewed Don Thompson and many others, this idea of passion being a guiding principle for how they selected the right career opportunities, they were more discerning. In other words, they took fewer opportunities to move to a new location, fewer opportunities to accept a new promotion, if it didn't allow them to be their best, shine their light the brightest, and bring their best self. And in doing so, while they were accepting of fewer opportunities, those opportunities propelled them further per opportunity. The mathematics are very simple, getting back to us being engineers. And so I'll leave that for the audience to reflect on. But these are the kinds of powerful insights we've been able to glean in the book and through the interviews and through the research.
And I think that's what makes it a unique book, is that we pull, these first-hand interviews, and certainly there are people who've written their own books about their own careers and trajectories, like Ken Chenault or Ursula Burns and others. And then we unify it with some of the research that's been done over the last 15 to 20 years that really tells a story about what's happening inside of corporations. So I think that's a good place to pause with the time we have left and take some questions. And I think some of the questions are going to be things that we've talked about in the book for sure. So I know, Margaret, you've been monitoring it. I don't know if you have some particular ones you want us to answer right away, or we can pick our own. What would you like us to do?
Oh, I'm so excited about all the questions that have come in. And I think a great place to start would be advice on the process for identifying a potential mentor and approaching someone to be your mentor.
Yeah, great. Great question. And we go deep on that in the book. So first of all, let's make sure people are clear. Old school thinking is that you got one mentor who can do everything. New school thinking is that you have a personal board of directors. You have multiple mentors who are providing you with support in different ways. And we list out 9 different roles that a mentor can play in your life and your career. And so finding a mentor is sometimes about thinking about where the gaps are in your network, in the mentors that you already have. Once you know that, then it's a matter of talking to other folks and saying, well, who do you think would be a good mentor to me? Talking to some of your peers, or talking to one of your managers. Managers are not mentors, so sometimes they can give you some good advice about somebody else that might be a good mentor for you. Going to different events, listening to talks from people within your company or your organization. And when you find people who are interesting or have qualities that you admire, sometimes it is literally going up to that person and saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you some more and hear some more about what you're working on. And you don't have to ambush them right away and say, I want you to be my mentor, although people do that. Say more, find out more about them beyond what you've talked about or what you've seen them talk about in a meeting. You want to go to the next one, or you want to add to that?
No, let's get as many questions in as we can. We'll go to the next one.
All right.
Great. Another great question that came in was from someone who's a non-minority manager, and she would like to know how you recommend that she can effectively support the advancement of minority job candidates or current employees in her role.
Awesome question. Let me reiterate something Dr. Robinson said, that a mentor is about development, a sponsor is about advancement, and an ally is about dismantling barriers to development and advancement. And I think all three represent opportunities to support the development of minorities, or as I might term them, emerging majorities. Mentoring someone that represents an underrepresented group, and helping to not only provide the career support, which is what some often interpret as the role of a mentor, but also what we call the psychological and social support, encouragement, affirmation, coaching, and the like, being a sounding board. In the area of sponsorship, I keep making references to Hamilton, but there's this song, "In the Room Where It Happens." The sponsor is in the room where it happens. When the decisions are being made about who gets the promotion or the bonus or is exposed to opportunity. If you're aware of opportunity, do not take for granted that someone is aware of an opportunity, and be that broker, be that bridge to say, hey, did you know so-and-so's looking for a project manager? Hey, did you know that they just are looking for somebody that manages that plant in California, et cetera. So sponsoring is really being that advocate. And then the ally, which we've been talking quite a bit about since the summer of 2020, is at the macro and the micro level. At the macro level, it's asking these seemingly almost obvious questions. Why are we only recruiting at those schools? How is that interview panel all men? How did we not have any diverse candidates for this position that we are looking to hire? Like, that's the macro level. At the micro level, it's you're in the room when someone is slighted, when their idea is taken, when they're not given the follow-up for what they brought to the table, when someone makes the same comment that they made 5 minutes ago and acts like it's a new comment. You're the one who says, whoa, wait a second. That was Jeffrey's idea. Whoa, wait a second. Jeffrey said that 5 minutes ago. Well, wait a second. You're telling me that Jeffrey was the one who did all the back research, but we're going to assign so-and-so to do the follow-up? That's at the micro level of being an ally with a little a. The macro was the ally with a big A. You can get in on all three.
That's right. That's right. Very good. Let's go on to the next one.
So I love this question. What about seeking out mentors who are different race or gender? And can you share what you think the benefits are to that?
Oh, yeah. So it's one of the things that comes out of the research, that your mentor doesn't have to be just like you in order to get value out of the relationship. We talk explicitly about that in the book. Mentors have, especially if you think about mentors as having different roles and providing different kinds of information, then you can learn and develop a great mentor relationship with anyone. In fact, sometimes you're learning from them, but they're also learning from you because there are lines of difference that you're crossing, and that's a good and positive thing. One of the research components that go along with that is that the folks who were the minority managers in the study that David Thomas in Breaking Through, what he references there, that those folks who were the managers and plateaued, their mentors and other developmental relationships and their network was monolithic. It was either all white or it was either all non-white, and there was not diverse in the middle. Those folks who went to the executive level had diverse networks, including their mentors. And so it kind of speaks to the power of that diversity being utilized even in your mentor networks.
And I would just add quickly that it's also a wonderful opportunity for two things: to develop your own cultural competence, your ability to navigate and understand differences. And it's also a wonderful way to foster and practice courageous conversations about topics that we in the old school didn't really discuss in the workplace, but in the new school, it's all fair game, because having these courageous conversations creates cultures of inclusion and belonging.
That's great. And I love hearing that cultural competency. That's something that I work on with, my area of specialty with military and veterans as well. So love hearing that. We had a question come in about sort of differentiation by industry. So they're wondering if you noticed any difference, for instance, in does this happen differently in healthcare versus in higher ed or business roles? So would you like to speak to that?
Yeah. Simple answer is no. Well, I mean, sure, there are variations across the different these different organizational types, but the patterns, unfortunately, seem to be the same for representation. When we look at a lot of the different tops of the organization, it still looks very white and very male for most of the corporate America and academia and the like. And so what changes it? Well, it comes back to the same things we're talking about. When we interviewed the folks who got to the top in those different fields, they still talked about mentorship, their networks, and they were particular about how they did it. Again, it reflected things that we've talked to other folks about. They talked about having sponsors. We could talk to you about, Ursula Burns and her story, or Ken Chenault and his story. And one was in banking and one was in technology. And yet the story about how they got to the top, they kind of ring the same, about having allies and sponsors who were really clear about finding and identifying them and giving them opportunity. So while there may be differences in the content, the patterns are very, very similar.
Fantastic. We have one person who'd like to take it back to the part of the discussion about the Ikigai diagram, and asked if you would speak to how you transition to a state, I guess you will, if you will, of Ikigai.
Yeah. How do you get there, or how do you transition to it? So we do talk about the pivot that people, certainly in the middle of their sort of work life, their arc of their career, that we've seen people do, and we have some stories about people who made some dramatic changes. And here's what they say. They say, number one, they had to commit to it, right? They had to really say, okay, I'm ready for a change. But of course, just like everybody else, I've got bills. So they're trying to reconcile, what I can get paid for with some of these other dimensions. But once they made that commitment and found ways that were outside of their chosen path to do it, you know what? They found out they had less stress. They had found more meaning in what they were doing, had more time in their life to do meaningful things. They said, I don't know why I didn't make these changes. And these folks. These are the folks who leave a great corporate career and then go on to run a nonprofit organization. And they're like, I love this work. And there are people who make changes and change industries to find things that were important to them. So yeah, we do talk about that a bit more in the book, but the transition is important because it sets you up for things that you're able to do later on, and things we didn't talk about today. Transforming systems, being entrepreneurial, being somebody who's entrepreneurial inside of another company, and taking that excellence to the point where you have now left a legacy that means something.
Well, this has been fantastic, and I know there's a couple of additional questions that we'll hold on to and share with the two of you, and perhaps get a little bit of follow-up response out in our correspondence that includes the recording. Many people always ask about the recording and the presentation. That will all be part of what we send everyone's way. So a big, huge thank you to Jeff Robinson and Randall Pinkett. It was my fangirl moment today, because I've spent time as a student at the same time of these two gentlemen, and really have enjoyed seeing their careers progress so wonderfully. But I also have a formal thanks from Dean Lay's lifelong learning team and all of my colleagues here at the business school. Thank you so much, Randall and Jeff, for being here today and sharing information about your new book and your unique leadership journeys. And the conversation I found extremely informative and relevant, and I love the format. And I think our audience did as well. They were fantastic and interactive, and really enhanced the discussion with their participation in Q&A. For those who wanted to have information about the book, we will be sending this to everyone who has registered. But if you happen to be watching this as video recording afterward, here's a link below, so that you can order the book if you would like to. Someone had asked if it was available in digital format, and it is. I saw that on the website, took a quick look for them.
Good.
So beginning in the fiscal year 2023, which for us is July 1st, the RBS Signature Leadership Series will be on the move. Our webinars will begin to be on Fridays in the even-numbered months. And for more information, you can always visit our webpage, which is obviously up there on the site. The exciting schedule of topics and presenters that we always have is thanks to wonderful suggestions from our audience. And this one was as well. So we appreciate that, and we encourage you to keep sharing your great ideas with us. We want the series to continue to meet your needs, so please stay online for just a few seconds longer as today's webinar ends. You'll immediately see a very brief survey about today's events, and one of those survey questions is a free-form field to type in topics and/or speakers you'd like to see featured in future webinars. And finally, as I mentioned a couple times today, a link to the archived recording of this presentation will be shared via social media and emailed to those who registered, and it will appear on the Business Insights page of our website. So my longtime friend, Jeff, my very recent friend, Randall, I thank you both so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you, Margaret. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.